Hi, I'm Taylor Burrows. Me and my partner Steve VanderVeen interviewed Robert John VanderVeen for our Veteran Histories Project.
So basically just start us off by explaining before you were enlisted in the draft, where you were born and some.
Okay. Are we on?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, to begin with, then, I was born in Kalamazoo. I am the youngest of 9 children. And they lived in Kalamazoo until I was probably 6 or 7 years old and moved to Schoolcraft on a farm. And
what were your parents doing at that time? What were their occupations?
my dad was a celery grower in Kalamazoo.
Okay.
Before we moved to the farm. Of course, once we moved to the farm, he made his livelihood there. Raising pigs was his specialty, but we also had cows and sheep and run-of-the-mill animals on the farm.
Okay. Did any of your family members, brothers or sisters of your dad, serve in the military?
I had a brother that did, an older brother, and he tried to join the Navy, but in taking his physical, they found out he was colorblind, and they didn't want any colorblind in the Navy, I guess, so he immediately was drafted into the Army.
Okay. So you were talking about you were in college before you were drafted.
You know, when I graduated from high school, I went to K College, and I was there for 2 years, and I didn't finish the second year. I was drafted, but drafted and went through orientation in Detroit and Fort Custer and Battle Creek, and then I did all my military training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Okay. What was your specialized training?
Well, after I got through the basic training, I was sent to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where I was doing water supply specialist, where you take water that's not drinkable and you filter it and you treat it with chemicals and so it can be consumed.
Okay. Can you kind of explain what was it like coming out of college and being drafted and then having to adapt to a military type lifestyle?
Well, it's kind of shock for most, I think. A lot of discipline. You do a lot of things that maybe don't make sense, but you do them because you're told. That's a little bit of a shocker for anybody coming out of civilian life, I think. Until you get through basic. After you get through basic, it's not that bad in terms of, depends on what your assignment is and what your duty is at that time. But basic training is really not fun.
Okay. So let's talk about your wartime service. You served in Korea, and
Yes.
How did you stay in touch with your family back at home?
Well, I wrote letters, of course. We didn't have any communications like they do today, so letter was the only way you could really get in touch with them, back and forth. I know I got married just before I went overseas, and I shipped out of Fort Lewis, Washington, and went on a ship for 18 days, and ended up in Japan. And of course that was the first land that we've been on. We had a mail call, and I think I had 10 letters, but of course for 18 days I didn't have any. And then I was in Japan for approximately 2 weeks, and then they shipped into Korea. Stationed in Pusan, Korea, which is a southern port in Korea.
And there you were just purifying water for the
There I
soldiers.
was in a unit that, in Pusan, that purified the water for all of the military as well as one hospital. I was at that hospital, I was in charge at that point for a while, where we were getting water in kind of a stream coming down from the mountain, and also was going through the rice paddies, so we had a reservoir that we collected it in, pumped it out, and filtered it and treated it, and then we pumped it to a hospital that was further down the mountain, so.
Okay. And did you have any free time over in Korea, like when you're off duty, or?
Well, our situation was a little different because we were on a water point, we were on duty for 24 hours,
Okay.
but there were more than one of us, there was at least 3 or 4. So you had to kind of take turns in what you were doing. Time off, you had time off, but there was nothing to do. We were at a situation that was a compound, it was fenced in. You could do anything you wanted inside the fence. And we did go to a military center for our meals. We didn't have to cook our meals. But I was driving a deuce-and-a-half truck back and forth with a guide, so
Okay.
I guess that was our off time.
Okay, so at the kind of ending point in that conflict with Korea, where, at that point in time, where were you?
I probably was in Fort Lewis, Washington before. I didn't see any combat. There was no combat, although we carried live ammunition on the water points. Everything was fenced in, the water point was fenced in, and we did have a couple of problems with somebody cutting holes in the fence to get inside. The one thing that we had problems with some of the civilian Koreans is that we had, our supplies included chlorine, and chlorine is a bleach, and of course they didn't have any types of things to clean their clothes, but the bleach would, and they would, given the opportunity, they would take that. And of course, when we're in a compound, we have our own personal things that they could take, but we never had anybody that we caught in, but we did see the holes in the fence. But.
Okay. And so after the whole conflict, how did you come about returning to home? Did you come back on a boat?
Came back on a boat again, which I wasn't happy to do. There's a lot of seasickness going on.
Yeah.
Especially going over, there was a lot. Coming back, I and a couple of my buddies were a little smarter. We didn't go through the regular chow line, because that's where everybody's getting sick, where the food was.
Yeah.
So we volunteered to go down in the hole where they kept all the supplies, and we ate fruit and ice cream. That's all we ate.
Okay. Was it hard for you to come back home, returning from war and readjusting to civilian life?
No, I was anxious to get back to civilian life.
Yeah.
As different vets are involved in gunfire and so on with a lot of casualties, I think it's a different situation. I didn't experience that, fortunately.
Okay. Are you still in contact with any of your veterans that you worked with?
Not that I served with. They're spread all over the country, and there were only a couple of them that were very close. The rest of them were, I don't even know where their hometowns were. But no, I got into civilian life pretty easy. And,
Okay. So reflecting back on the overall war, are there any life lessons that you've learned from military service?
Well, you live in close proximity to a lot of people, so you learn to be a little tolerant, I guess. That was probably a plus. When I look back on it, the whole experience was a plus, but I didn't always enjoy it all. Saw a lot of the country, from the East Coast to the West Coast, going through the different training, and then of course going to Japan, and had an opportunity to go R&R in Japan to Tokyo, so you saw a few things there. Coming home, the thing that I didn't look forward to is the boat ride again for 18 days.
Yeah. Well, well, thank you for your time,
All
I
right.
guess.
I enjoyed the interview.